Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start the afternoon's first plenary session on bioethics in the Eastern Mediterranean region. A very good afternoon to all of you. My name is Vu Teck Chuan. Teck Chuan is my first name. I'm based at the Office of Ethics in Healthcare at SingHealth in Singapore. So I'm also a member of the International Association of Bioethics Board, and I'm its newly appointed communication officer. So today's session is rather special. It's a collaboration with the WHO Regional Office for the Eastern Mediterranean, right? And just to give you a background, we at WAB, IAB are keen to explore collaborations with the World Health Organization in many ways. And this is just one of the ways that we are doing. So at each World Congress, we're going to organize a panel with the WHO to examine bioethical issues from various perspectives. So in this case, we're looking at ethical issues, contemporary bioethical matters in the Eastern Mediterranean region. We have a very fantastic lineup of speakers from this region. Professors Ehsan Gushki, Fahad Moazzam, Mohammad Ghali, and Dr. Ahmad Mandil. I'm supposed to co-chair this session with the current Director of Information, Evidence and Research from EMRO, but unfortunately he's not here, Dr. Arash Rashidian. So I'll invite Dr. Ahmad Mandil to say a few words from WHO EMRO's perspective.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure and an honor to be with you here. I would like first to thank the organizers of this wonderful conference for bringing us all to Doha in Qatar, and also to be part of the first global conference on bioethics in this region. I just want to mention that we are privileged to be with you here, and my name is Ahmad Mandil. I was the coordinator of research and innovation in the regional office of WHO in Cairo, and this included 3 areas of work: research, promotion and development, digital health and innovation, as well as the Eastern Mediterranean Health Journal. Among the responsibilities I was taking care of was the Secretariat of the Eastern Mediterranean Research Ethics Review Committee, which is responsible for ethically reviewing WHO-funded research in 22 member states of the region, including the Gulf states and the Arab states, and 3 non-Arabic speaking states, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the Islamic Republic of Iran. The regional office of WHO in Cairo has actually established 3 collaborating centers on bioethics in our region, at CBEC, or the Center of Bioethics and Culture in Karachi, Pakistan, at the Medical Ethics Department of the Tehran University of Medical Sciences at Tehran, Islamic Republic of Iran, and finally at the Salim al-Hos program on bioethics in Beirut, Lebanon. So this is part of the world which has 3 of the 13 bioethics collaborating centers with the World Health Organization. So without further ado, I actually would like to invite Dr. TC from Singapore to introduce the speakers. Thanks very much.
Right, so the first speaker will be Dr. Ehsan Gushki. He's going to talk about bioethics in the Iranian context, justification and practice. And he's going to help us to understand the contextual factors that shape bioethics in the Islamic Republic of Iran and the ethical justification of medical practices such as organ transplantation. Ehsan is Associate Professor of Bioethics at Tehran University of Medical Sciences, Iran. And he's also a lecturer at Monash Bioethics Center at Monash University, Australia. He's a current member and vice chair of the UNESCO International Bioethics Committee, and he has contributed to the work of the World Health Organization in many areas, including as a consultant to the WHO Global Health Ethics and Governance Unit as the lead writer of the Global Ethics Guidelines. At the national level, he has served as senior advisor to the president of Iran Medical Council and co-founder of Iran's National Clinical Ethics Committee. So he has contributed nationally, regionally, and internationally. Ehsan.
Thank you so much. Thank you, TC, for your introduction. Thanks to organizers of this great meeting in our region, which is happening for the first time. I express my gratitude to the International Bioethics Association and to our great host in Qatar. I will present on bioethics in Iranian context, justification and practice. And if my slides are shared, could be shared here. As you know, the contemporary bioethics has primarily evolved in a secular of the global north and Western countries, deeply rooted in the tenets of political liberalism. In such a context, public policies, including those related to mass debated bioethical issues such as abortion, voluntary assisted dying, are usually shaped in a democratic process within a pluralistic society. In this process, bioethicists who are mostly liberal, based on present evidence, play a crucial role in the context. However, in this discourse, I aim to cast a spotlight on the contextual factors that have profoundly shaped the landscape of bioethics in Iran. So, as you know, Iran is a country within the Eastern Mediterranean region with around 87 million inhabitants and citizens, around 5 million refugees, mainly from Afghanistan, and around 5 million Iranians who live outside the country. And as you can see in this slide, East Mediterranean region has a trend of publication in bioethics, very growing in recent years, and also the citation of publications from bioethics literature of Eastern Mediterranean region is growing as well. And according to a recent evidence, Iran is the country with highest number of publications in the region in the field of bioethics. Although we have other countries that now are experiencing a very high growth rate in bioethics literature. So I want to use this opportunity to invite you to the tomorrow discussion on this issue, that I will talk more about this issue. The question about justification raised when I was a young medical PhD student in the field of bioethics. My project was on do not resuscitate orders in Iranian context. And the main question was why issues like do not resuscitate orders, which is related to end-of-life issues, couldn't be justified in the context that other sensitive issues like abortion or therapeutic abortion and sex reassignment surgeries and organ transplantation, brain death could be practiced and justified. Even third-party gamete donation, sperm donation, egg donation. This was the main question. So I tried to answer the question of justification. I realized justification of something, those things that are more sensitive in our bioethics literature, like organ transplantation and reproduction issues, is not only related to their moral acceptability, and there are other things in this regard. As you know, Iran's political legal system is basically based on Sharia law, a Shiite or Shia interpretation, one Shia interpretation of Islamic Sharia. So I try to navigate the process of justification of abortion and the assisted reproductive technologies in Iranian context. And I found two main type of issues. The first type of issues are those of publicly sensitive issues like abortion or assisted reproductive technologies. In this area, for example, looking at the therapeutic abortion and the process of justification of therapeutic abortion, or in embryo donation to infertile couples, or in organ transplantation after brain death, three of them have been translated to national laws by Iranian parliaments and were passed through the Iran Guardian Council, which is a kind of religious body that checks all laws and regulations to be compatible with Sharia. These issues were, approved. But the problem was why end-of-life care issues for my thesis was not approved. So I tried to address this and find a kind of process or find a kind of pattern how these things have been justified in that context. And finally, I realized that usually in these cases, there is a kind of first a public need, a public request, which is usually translates or transferred by medical professionals to politicians or governments. And if there is enough pressure from public and then from the professional bodies, then first, there is a kind of requesting for fatwas from religious scholars and jurists, and then fatwas are translated to laws, and then the laws are translated to bylaws. So this is the pattern in all three areas of brain death, organ transplantation, gamete donation, embryo donation, and therapeutic abortion. But another pathway is also possible. Those things that are not translated to laws, they are practiced based on fatwas. Usually the fatwa comes from the supreme leader of the country, who is a jurist, and his fatwa has a kind of political power in addition to religious power. So issues like organ transplantation from living donors, compensated organ transplantation is usually done by fatwa, or third-party gamete donation or sperm donation is done from a non-formal pathway, just using that kind of fatwas. This is one interesting example about sex reassignment surgeries, which is really striking that Iran is one of the countries with highest number of sex reassignment surgeries for transsexual people. And this was justified in the Iranian context with the fatwa of the first leader of Islamic Republic of Iran. And we see that successfully justified cases like sex reassignment surgeries have a kind of emerging public request. They have transferring needs to responsible bodies by medical professionals. The reflection of those needs to religious bodies seeking for fatwa, and finally, starting a non-official process. And as you can see, the sex reassignment surgeries had this component, so it is now practiced. Even we don't have a law on sex reassignment surgeries. But for example, for my case of do not resuscitate orders or foregoing life-sustaining treatments, the problem is the first one, because this is not usually what people want in Iranian context. At least there is not an apparent social pressure for this. Recently, we have more and more pressure for this because we expect in a society like Iran that now is transforming, is changing, but traditionally a religious society with a majority of Muslim people who believe, for example, in concepts like shifa, they don't want to cut or withhold or forego life-sustaining treatments. So do not resuscitate is not legal and couldn't be done in Iranian context. I passed this one. For technical bioethics guidance, technical issues, not something publicly important like abortion or assisted reproductive technologies, there is usually no big problem, like research ethics, clinical ethics, professional ethics, and public health ethics. For example, ethics on stem cell research, we have the recognition of 14 days limit for research on human embryos, which is basically a Western concept. These things are more easily passed through the regulatory system. They don't go to parliament or those places. There's less sensitivity on them. Or, for example, there's a very recent case on withholding curative and diagnostic measure for brain death victims who are not candidates for organ transplantation. Even in this case, it's not possible to turn off the ventilator, but it's only been said that you can just stop therapeutic and diagnostic measures for those people. Or, for example, in developing code of ethics for medical professionals in Iran, we just I conducted this project that we concluded that the third-party authorization, like husband or father authorization for capable adult women, is not, necessary. So it's now the regulation of the country. So in these professional issues, or for example, priority setting for early access to COVID-19 vaccines in Islamic Republic in Iran, thanks to Dr. Mandil for publishing this in the Islamic Health Journal. These are things that are happening in the technical bodies like Ministry of Health, and in these cases, there is not much jurisprudential or religious check for them. Their main process of justification is a kind of professional need than a public need, transferring needs to ethics bodies of, for example, Ministry of Health, National Research Ethics Committee or National Clinical Ethics Committee, and then development of a guidance. And finally, in Iranian context, we have a kind of biopolitical influence as many other countries. It means that the higher level policies have great impact on bioethical issues. For example, in the case of population policies in Iranian society, from the first up to now, we have a kind of sinus pattern. Sometimes we have liberal cultural policies, sometimes there are some revolutionary religious policies, sometimes we have reformist liberal cultural policies. Again, with this sinus political system changing, the population policies, the motivation for population policies change. As it changed, policies on abortion, policies of prenatal testing are also changing. Because, for example, a recent law that is approved in Iran in 2021 is on population growth. Government want to increase the population because of the low growth rate of population. Or other motivations, and some evidence that many illegal abortion and elective abortion are the law ethical issues like abortion at almost prenatal diagnosis. Again, there are important limitations. For example, according to the recent law, physicians are not permitted to inform their parents, the parents who come for prenatal testing, about the possibility of prenatal testing unless the parents ask for such genetic testing. So it's a kind of restriction of putting restriction on patient-physician relationship. You cannot disclose all this information. These are higher political issues that impact bioethics issues in the Iranian context. With this, I conclude, and I appreciate your attention, and I'll be here for your possible question. Thank you so much.
I'm sure you have many questions for Ehsan, but we'll hold these questions at the end of all the 4 talks, and that's when we engage in a Q&A. In addition to asking the panelists questions, I also encourage you to share your own experiences in response to the content of the talks. I'm going to invite the next speaker. I've known her for many years. She has practically seen me grown up. Her name is Professor Fahad Moazzam, and she'll be talking on the challenges of clinical ethics in a collectivistic culture perspective from Pakistan. And she'll be discussing some of the challenges and approaches to education in clinical ethics from her country's perspective. She's a pediatric surgeon by training with an MA in bioethics and a doctorate in religious studies from the University of Virginia, USA. She's professor and founding chairperson of the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture of the Sindh Institute of Urology and Transplantation in Karachi, Pakistan. She has also served as founding chairperson of the Department of Surgery and the first associate dean of postgraduate medical education at Aga Khan University. She's a member of her National Bioethics Committee, Pakistan, and has served the WHO in various capacities, including as a member of the WHO Ebola Ethics Working Group and the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissues Task Force. Professor Moazzam.
Thank you very much for the introduction, Dr. Chuan. However, I will notice by saying I've watched you grow up, he has kind of pegged me for how senior I am. But I come from a country where seniority works in your favor. So anyway, thank you very much for this invitation. And to the Congress organizers for giving me this opportunity to say a few words to you today. So as Dr. Chuan has said, I've been involved both with the WHO and the Eastern Mediterranean region for many years, and have also served on the IAB board of directors. So it's really a pleasure for me to be here, part of a plenary discussion that is bringing together these 2 very important key groups who are interested in fostering bioethics, global bioethics. So, and I believe this is probably the first time that these 2 groups have come together. Okay, So the topic or the theme for this particular panel today is kind of very ambitious, very expansive, which is bioethics in Eastern Mediterranean region, capacities, capabilities, and challenges. I've always wondered how Pakistan ended up being a member of the Eastern Mediterranean region, but WHO works in mysterious ways. So I'm just glad to be here because that gives me an opportunity to be here today. So I will try to be brief in what I have to say because I think the advantage of panel discussions like this is to hear from the audience. And what I have to say and what our other speakers have to say, it would be nice to hear from you people also about the challenges that you face. And I will not use slides because I would prefer that you concentrate on some of the points I make rather than read my slides. So I will cover two challenges. I know Pakistan, so I'm going to talk about Pakistan. And I'm going to touch on two challenges that we have faced and are continue to face in bioethics education in Pakistan. In the globalization of bioethics, this has also occurred to countries where the living realities for the people there differ in significant ways from those who live in countries where contemporary bioethics actually took place. So what I will say is, I believe, also relevant to other low-income countries and low-middle-income countries, in addition to some of the countries in the Eastern Mediterranean region. Because there's a whole expanse here. If you look at the 22 countries that make the Eastern Mediterranean region, these are countries who have very vastly different histories. They're very diverse in their cultures and value systems, in their political systems, and particularly in the socio-economic realities. So what I will talk about is probably would also be applicable to the lower middle income and lower income countries. Okay, so there are two challenges that I'm going to raise in front of you. The first thing is the challenge to provide what I call functional literacy in bioethics in the programs that we run. And I'll explain what functional means. The second point that I will raise with you or present to you is the challenge that countries like Pakistan face in fostering research, which is ethical, but also is relevant to the needs of the country. I will then conclude, and I'll share some of the steps that we are trying to use and have introduced within the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture in Pakistan to address these. So the first point, which is developing educational programs that provide functional literacy in bioethics. So let me explain what I mean by functional literacy. I see this literacy as different from the theoretical knowledge of a discipline. And to borrow from UNESCO and the definition that they came up with, what is functional literacy. So I see functional literacy is something that enables individuals to function effectively both within and to the benefit of their communities, the ones that they have to serve. In functional literacy, therefore, tuning into local contexts and engaging with them is key. If you do not do that, then you will not turn out people who have literacy that is functional. So contemporary bioethics arrived in Pakistan in the late 1990s as a distinct discipline. And in the globalization of bioethics, the educational paradigm that remains dominant was the one popularized by American philosophers Tom Beecham and Jim Childress. And this is through the very influential book, Principles of Biomedical Ethics, which is probably in its 9th edition now. Now, I'm not a bioethicist, I'm a physician. I'm a physician who is interested in bioethics and as it applies to the field of healthcare. So the interesting thing is, over the years, I have yet to see any physician who has read Beecham and Childress's book, Principles of Biomedical Ethics. However, the 4 principles that they enumerate, that the authors enumerate, and all of you, I'm sure here, know that, it's like a mantra, autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So these are secular philosophical principles which the authors argue can provide the basis for the common morality, and this would be irrespective of local values. The issue is that these people may not have read the book, and this includes many healthcare professionals in the United States, but these 4 principles are very easy to memorize. I can go anywhere in Pakistan to run a workshop, begin with a question, and that would be in Urdu. आपके ख्याल में bioethics क्या है? In your opinion, what do you think is bioethics? And invariably, the answer is autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. So this is one of the issues that we face in Pakistan as to what is bioethics and this dominance of these principles. Physicians, healthcare professionals are not complicated people, and they like things that are simple. Now, as a result of this, however, when in many classrooms, when teaching is going on about healthcare decisions, and there's a conflict there, very often these discussions, I have found, are reduced to it's an abstract, non-contextual tug of war that they're discussing between the autonomy, respecting the patient's autonomy, versus the beneficence of the treating physician. And it's a theoretical, non-contextual discussion that is taking place. Now, the ironical thing is that the same students and residents who we are educating in the morning in classrooms, in the afternoons are going down to work in the clinics. And when they go down to work in the clinics, this is the time when they are actually looking at real life, taking care of real patients. And in Pakistan, which is something that some of you, I'm sure, also know, Pakistan is a traditional religious society. It has a collective orientation to life. People there live profoundly interdependent lives. And this is psychologically, emotionally, but also financially. This is a society that gives preference to duties over individual rights, and decisions are often made collectively. Now, there are variations to this because it's a diverse culture, but a lot of these values I've talked about cut across this. Now, when you go there, when you practice, these same residents will come to the clinics where patients and their families often refer to healthcare professionals as you are like my my mother, or you are the same as Appa or Baji, my older sister. And where they look at us and they say, you are an instrument of God's mercy on earth, and that God has given you Shifa in your hands. So essentially, what the students are being taught about bioethics in classes in the morning doesn't get them very far when they, in the clinics in the afternoon, where they are actually interacting with patients and their families. So this is one area. I will, at the end, I will just give you some of the steps that we try to take to correct this. The second challenge that we have, that we face, is essentially how do you make research relevant to the needs of the population? There's been an explosive increase in the interest in promoting research in different countries, which includes the so-called Global South. And this is at governmental and institutional levels, and this occurs in Pakistan. So what we have noticed is that in the last 2 decades, the requests that come to our center for workshops to set up ERCs, ethics review committees, the number of these requests now far outnumber the requests we get for workshops and seminars, etc., in clinical ethics. Research is very important, obviously, because it advances our knowledge that can help. But it also has other utility. It brings into the country this is with collaborative research, brings in foreign exchange, governments like that. It also brings fame to researchers if you collaborate with famous researchers elsewhere. The problem with this that we have found is, and which is a universal issue, is that funding of research has shifted from primarily universities to a big role of the pharmaceutical industry. So some of you most of you must know the golden rule, but the golden rule is, if you look at it and are cynical, is really, the golden rule is that whoever has the gold makes the rules. This came first in a cartoon strip in Wizard of Oz, where there was a king and he said, this is the golden rule. Whoever has the gold makes the rules. And to some extent, this is now very prominent within research. So the funding agencies, and this is certainly true in Pakistan, are the ones who more or less control what kind of research is going to be done and in what areas. And I think this is something that, quote, the Global South needs to be sensitive about, for the simple reason that all of us know that there is an increase in the last several years of collaborative research where the host, where the research actually is in our part of the world. So I'll just give you some data about the research. Pakistan has a National Bioethics Committee of Research, and it gets proposals, any research that's being done, particularly with funding from outside, has to be reviewed to get ethical clearance. So I'll just share with you some of the data on the nature of the research proposals that come to the Pakistani committee. I wish to acknowledge Ms. Soaliha Shekhani. She's my associate in CBEC, who also helped me get some of this information. So in Pakistan, there is a large number of research proposals that come for review, that involve trials related to maternal and child health. Now, in this, a significant number of trials deal with drugs for eclampsia and other issues that pregnant women face, and for children, micronutrients. What kind of micronutrients should they get? There's another group of research proposals that deal with trials on different drugs for non-infectious diseases, which includes diabetes and hypertension. Now, in comparison, the committee receives few, if any, studies that are related to infectious diseases, which is still a big problem in Pakistan. For example, there have been no research proposals to look at malaria or dengue, which produce major morbidity and mortality. What is most saddening is that there's no sociological, qualitative work that is being done, which is, as you know, gives us a lot of information. And I think that's important. So 90% of the proposals received for review by the committee are funded by external resources, external sources that lie outside Pakistan. However, the other interesting thing, which we have noticed, is that it is not that all such research proposals actually make it for ethical clearance. Some of them are done without this step. So as an example, Dr. Natasha Anwar, who's also somewhere here, is also our associate faculty. For her MA in bioethics, for her thesis, she had done a survey based on publications about genetic research that was done, collaborative research done in Pakistan. And there, interestingly, none of these research proposals had clearance from the National Bioethics Committee. So let me just conclude by telling you some of the steps that we in the center are trying to introduce to address some of the challenges we face. So the picture is not all doom and gloom in Pakistan where bioethics is concerned. There's a tremendous increase in the awareness of the importance of education and bioethics, and we see this in our center. We run 2 programs, formal award, degree awarding programs, and we have a very large number of people who apply to those. So what are some of the steps we're taking? I'm putting this up front, and I would like to hear in the discussion whether others face the same problem and are taking any steps. So one of the things that we do is we aim for, in clinical ethics particularly, we aim for functional literacy. How do we do that? We use cases from within the country for discussion. And we make them contextual. We try to minimize the use of cases and ethical dilemmas that are on sexy, esoteric topics, like stem cell research, research of reproductive issues. And so we stick to more practical things. We make short videos on the cases that we see. The other thing is, which is important for functional literacy, is that you have to encourage critical assessment and engagement with the local values. You learn to question arguments from students who say, well, it's done this way because this is our culture, or this is what Islam says. So sensitizing our students help. The other thing that we do is we put greater emphasis on virtue ethics. There's a long history of that within our own Islamic Muslim traditions. And I believe that in places like Pakistan, where the law doesn't work very well, if you have a virtuous, that's very old-fashioned, isn't it? Virtuous doctor, then that is a better, better safeguard for patients. The other thing, as far as research is concerned, we try that what we teach is not just procedural. This is how you make an ERC. These are the number of members you should have, etc. There too, we use local cases and focus on getting students to understand the injustices that occur within research ethics. The other thing in research that we do is we encourage our students to do a mixed method research for their MA thesis. For example, the two students currently that we have in our MA program, one is actually looking at what are the virtues that patients want within their physicians and comparing that to what the physicians think about it. And the second one is actually doing a survey on students, university students, about how decision-making should be done. So I'm going to stop there. One of the big issues, of course, is that you have to learn to work with the government, which is not easy, because it is through the governments that we need to actually strengthen our national bioethics committees so they get more teeth. So I'm going to stop there, and I look forward to some discussion on some of these areas. I'd love to hear from how do you face your challenges? Thank you.
Thanks, Fahad. I think some of the challenges are quite commonplace, including in Singapore, and we have the opportunity to discuss them a bit more later on. The next speaker is, I think, someone who needs no introduction since he's the chair of the Congress. But I'm going to say something short about him. Dr. Muhammad Ghali is Professor of Islam and Biomedical Ethics at the Research Center for Islamic Legislation and Ethics at the College of Islamic Studies at HBKU. He specializes at issues that lies at the intersection of Islamic studies and biomedical sciences, and he's the editor-in-chief of the Journal of Islamic Ethics. And he's going to talk on informed consent for women and children, perspectives from contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse, drawing on the Qatar's experience. Professor Ghali.
Thank you so much, TC. I will not care if this is working or not because I'm not using PowerPoint. So I will try to see how we can get the focus of the audience without a PowerPoint. The main purpose here is to minimize technological dependency, which is part of the bioethical issues now also. I was asked to focus on the question of informed consent, especially when it comes to women and children. I suppose that asking me to speak about the informed consent of women and Islamic perspective because there is an assumption that there is a problem. This is one. Children, it's challenging anyhow in the bioethical discourse, even outside the Islamic tradition. I need to start with a number of introductory remarks. The first one about the contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse, what we mean hereby. Contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse, contemporary starting from the 1980s, more or less. This is what I mean when I say contemporary. And this is the time when we have a reintroduction of the mechanism of collective ijtihad, the so-called al-ijtihad al-jama'i, So the ethical reasoning, the Islamic religious and ethical reasoning will not be done anymore by only one individual religious scholar, but by a group. This is one. Second, it will not be done by religious scholars only, but it will be interdisciplinary. So it will be in discussion with biomedical scientists and physicians. And this form of discussion, this group discussion, interdisciplinary discussion, collective reasoning, started to assume an institutional form from, roughly speaking, the beginning of the 1980s. And the 1980s, 1981, I think when 1980 coincided with the beginning of a new Hijri century. I think it was the 15th Hijri century, 14 plus. And this has revived some ideas about ijtihad, وإن الله يبعث على رأس كل 100 سنة من يجدد لها أمر دينها أو من يجدد لها دينها. So there is always this enthusiasm, and by the beginning of the century, there will be new modes of ijtihad, etc. Bioethical issues were at the core of these discussions. This is number one. And secondly, a new, more or less a new mechanism. Yes, it has its roots in Islamic history, but using it in this institutional form was something quite new. I wrote extensively about this collective ijtihad and the institutions of collective ijtihad. And we have here, we will have a whole session about the pioneers, our seniors who paved the way for all these discussions, who made it possible today because of their starting the whole discussion in these 1980s. So through this mechanism, we have three institutions that have been active since the beginning of the 1980s till now. They happen to be, all of them based in now what we call the Gulf region, two in Saudi Arabia, International Islamic Fiqh Academy in Jeddah and Islamic Fiqh Academy in Mecca, and one in Kuwait, the Islamic Organization for Medical Sciences. When I say in my presentation, contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse, I mainly mean these discussions and the outcome of these conferences. To be clear, this is not the whole Islamic bioethical discourse. There have been individual religious scholars who also issued fatwas, made their own publications, sometimes agreed, sometimes disagreed with these institutions, and so on. So there are, the discourse is wide enough and diverse enough. And there were also these institutions, they are based in the Gulf region, but they are not Gulf institutions. They are transnational Islamic. So each country is represented, sometimes by one, sometimes by more. And countries with substantial Muslim minority like India, sometimes even Muslims living in West Europe and the United States were also represented. So and it's also trans school. You have the Sunni, you have the Shia, you have the Ibadi representatives. You had those who were more permissive and those who were more strict, and you have all these different voices. And to my mind, this is what makes the discourse of these institutions quite important when we analyze what we call contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse. So this is what I mean by contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse. How did this contemporary Islamic bioethical discourse handle the issue of consent of women and the consent of children? We have the International Islamic Code of Medical and Healthcare Ethics, الميثاق الإسلامي العالمي الأخلاقيات الطبية والصحية, issued in published in 2005, but the conference was in 2004. This code, International Islamic Code, is divided into two parts, into different parts or big bulks. One of them is divided into items, like what you have in codified laws. Item number 1, item number 2, and so on, مد الأولى الثانية, etc. And we have a good overview of the discussions of the three institutions about the different topics that were discussed up to 2004. And we have a section on research ethics. And the section on research ethics was based on an Arabic translation of an international document of CIOMS, and then given to the religious scholars and biomedical scientists, this mechanism of collective ijtihad, and they wrote an Islamic commentary of the different parts of this international document. The consent of women and children is quite intensively discussed in this international code, and of course, widespread in the publications of these institutions. When it comes to women, when we read international literature, and I have seen this at different times, my students, I teach a course on Islamic bioethics, my students, they have an assignment of writing a review, essay of one of the books. I've seen many times they use books on bioethics in general, not just Islamic bioethics, and they would write commentary on this. I have seen in their works more than once, whenever research ethics is from an Islamic perspective would come to be discussed in this international literature, they would say, but take care, women in the Muslim world, they don't have this right to do consent, etc. So take care that there are differences. And you hardly see any reference or any document about why do they come to these discussions. For women, what I have seen, generally speaking, and we can get into details when we are in the panel, the authority of woman over her body does not differentiate in any sense than the authority of the man over his body. As long as they are both adult, they have the sound mind, they are autonomous, they can make decisions, etc. So they can make decisions. That's it. What I have seen, they would say that if they are married, both the man and the woman, then each of them, it is advisable, recommended that they would consult. So when they speak about the man, they would say the man would consult with his wife. When they speak the wife, consult with his man, so that they enhance their co-living together, husnul ishra, etc. They are part of a family and so on. So this is one. Two, when the woman, the consent of the woman has something to do with the embryo, not only her body, but the embryo in her body or the fetus, when it comes, for instance, to abortion or something like this, what I've seen, the agreed upon perspective is that it is not only the consent of the woman. She does not consent alone. So the consent of the man is also mandatory. Most of the time, there is no so much explanation about this. But to my mind, and I think we have a panel today or tomorrow in which we will detail this, it's unperceivable, unimaginable for a woman, from an Islamic normative perspective, to have an embryo without marriage. So she must be married first. The same for the man. So the man cannot go to a bank, getting an egg, surrogate woman, pay everything, have a contract, and then will become a father. Unimaginable, because this violates the Islamic norm, basic Islamic norms agreed upon in the different schools. The same for the woman. So the woman must have a man and the man must have a woman. So this embryo is a joint right between the two. Okay, what if they disagree? One wants this and the other one does not want that. I didn't read much details about this, but I can speak about, based on my own readings, discussions with colleagues in my center. It seems that the general or the mainstream position is that some scholars would say the best interest of the embryo. So if one of the couple would say abort and the other one would say no, then we listen to the one who say no, because the right to life is one of the basic rights of the prospective child, so we give the child a chance. Some would get into this direction. Others would say no, the woman would have higher rights, because we have in Islam al-ma'an, the two waters, which we now translate into 23 and 23 chromosome. So the man is contributing, yes, the sperm, the 23 chromosome, but the woman is doing much more. And of course also doing nafaqa, maintenance for her and for the child, which is obligatory upon the man from an Islamic normative perspective, but the woman is doing much more. She's contributing the 23 chromosome, she's contributing the uterus, she's contributing the pregnancy, the delivery with all its pain and difficulties and suffering and all this. And the right to custody, she has always more authority over the child when the child is young. She has haqq al-hadana than the husband. So she has enough reasons to say that she has higher right than the husband. Now about the child, very briefly. The child is mainly, first and foremost, about the best interest of the child. Maslahatul tifl. How can we achieve the best interest of the child? So usually the religious scholars divide the acts into three: exclusively beneficial, exclusively harmful, and mixing between the beneficial and the harmful or in the gray area. They say in all cases, the guardian must take the decision. An appointed or assigned guardian should take the decision on behalf of the child. But if the decision does not achieve the best interest of the child, the judge has the right to revoke the consent or the decision of the guardian, because the best interest of the child is not there. The last point is that what about the child himself or herself? What I found is that, if not mistaken, the Hanafi school, particularly, they speak about the assent, that the child would say yes and no, and this would make a weight, especially when it comes to a discerning child, at-tifl al-mumayyiz, someone who can understand what a researcher or what a clinician, for instance, is talking to, can express themselves, and this would wait, and the guardian would be under at least moral obligation to listen to these preferences from the child. This is a very condensed and summarized overview of what happened in the discussions among the religious scholars and biomedical scientists, and I hope I could give a right overview, because those who participated are here with us. So, but they will correct me if there is anything wrong in this. Thank you very much.
So we've covered different scholars' perspectives on the country-specific issues. And now we're going to have Dr. Ahmad Mendil, who's going to look at issues from a more regional perspective. He's going to talk about the ethics of research under emergency and humanitarian settings, with special focus on the Eastern Mediterranean region. Professor Ahmad Mendil is Professor of Epidemiology at the High Institute of Public Health at the University of Alexandria, Egypt. He was the former coordinator, research and innovation, and former secretary of the Eastern Mediterranean region of the Research Ethics Review Committee of the WHO EMRO office. Dr. Ahmad Mendil.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon, and it's always a difficult task after Professors Ihsan Shamsi, Professor Farhat Muazzam, and Professor Muhammad Ghali, but I'm going to do my best. Ladies and gentlemen, you all know that this part of the world has so many emergencies, crises, and unfortunately disasters. And hence, half of the world's refugees, migrants, and IDPs are in this part of the world as well. And hence, doing research, which was referred to by the three speakers, has to actually be governed by ethical principles, which was referred to also by the prior speakers. So may I have the slides, please? Yes, thank you very much. So I'll try to actually shed the light on a few principles, if this works. Okay, so why do we do research during emergencies? We do research during emergencies at the three phases of emergencies. During the preparedness phase, to be ready. During the response phase, to understand different public health and health-related features, as well as accessibility to innovative, cost-effective solutions for emergencies, crises, and disasters. And also during the recovery phases, which follow epidemics, emergencies, crises, and disasters. So this is usually why do we do research during emergencies. According to the Council of International Organizations of Medical Sciences, which was also referred to by Professor Ghali, the research during emergencies is governed by the need for generation of knowledge quickly, maintaining public trust, overcoming practical challenges, and these challenges need to be clearly balanced with the need to ensure scientific validity, but also the ethical principles for conducting research on human subjects. So basically, the ethical standards that research must meet include scientific validity, the social value, collaborative partnerships, reasonable risk-benefit ratio, fair and voluntary participation, independent review processes, and equal moral respect for participants and the affected communities. What are the challenges of research during emergencies, ladies and gentlemen, on the overall? Challenges include support, whether this is financial, logistic, political, or having the appropriate personnel to conduct research, but also the methodologies, the necessary clearances, the choice of the design, mostly observational rather than experimental designs. How do you select the sample? Very difficult to be random during emergencies. Safety and security of the people who are doing research and the people who are researched, but also accessibility to data, which could be really challenging during emergencies, crises, and disasters, and also the need for intersectoral approach. The health, the social, the economic, the cultural, the security. And it was also noticed that grassroots organizations are actually more effective during emergencies in accessibility to migrant populations, refugee populations, and IDPs. They're closer to the people, and they're also more socio-culturally related to the communities they serve. The ethical challenges had to do with informed consent processes. Professor Ghali has actually reflected on women and children, but this is across the board of the life course approach. The risk-benefit assessment, safety and security training, adaptation, ongoing oversight, as well as confidentiality. Now, how can you protect confidentiality under the settings of migration, refugees, and IDPs? This is really challenging, and these are among the most important ethical challenges of research during emergencies. Timeliness, responsiveness, and rigor are most important, and in our region, which includes Arab states, according to WHO, except the Comoros Islands, Mauritania, as well as Algeria, but also the region, according to WHO, includes Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Iran. And you have listened to prior speakers from WHO collaborating centers in the Islamic Republic of Iran, Dr. Ihsan Shamsi Bushki, and from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, Professor Farhat Muaddam. So they actually lead the WHO collaborating centers in these countries, and they play a very important role in the support of bioethics in our part of the world. So, as far as research oversight in our region, this includes national ethics and bioethics committees. This includes institutional review boards within academic and research institutions, but also include research bodies within UN agencies, including the World Health Organization, such as the Eastern Mediterranean Research Ethics Review Committee, which I was the secretary of for almost 1 decade. And they are responsible for emergency research review procedures. So the committee in the Eastern Mediterranean for the last 3 or 4 years was co-chaired by Professor Jamal Surur, who was with us here, the former dean of the College of Medicine at Al-Azhar University, and Professor Mohammed Saleh bin Ammar, the former Minister of Health of Tunisia. And it includes 2 sets of members, external members, including UNESCO membership, as well as within WHO members representing the different technical programs in the regional office. The checklists which are used include different sections, but there is a special section for research during emergencies. So there is a set of questions which are asked to the researchers before commencing the research itself, including justification, harms and risks, analysis of harm-benefit ratios, mitigating strategies, the benefits to the communities, and explanations, but also a set of questions during the research itself. How are security clearances going to be carried out? How is the standardization and training for safety and security? How will data be accessed? What kind of tools will be used? And how about the ownership and dissemination of information? But the most important question is, how are we going to actually protect the participating individuals in research and maintaining confidentiality? After the research, we ask the researchers, whom are they going to report back to? The funding agency, the people on which they're doing research, or the scientific community at large, and how will this help the health policy making in the countries where the research is being done, and are participatory approaches to decisions regarding dissemination adequately covered? These committees, including the Research Ethics Review Committee within WHO, has been actually doing an incredible job during the COVID pandemic, doing its best to review WHO-funded proposals in an expedited fashion with quick feedback to the PIs, but one of the problems we faced was the national or institutional ethical clearance, which is a must for research to be cleared before it is carried out on people during emergencies. So the adaptation to standard ethical oversight includes centralized emergency ethics committees, pre-approval of research protocols, rolling ethics approval, and then joint approval by different ethical and regulatory bodies. So in order to conclude, there are ethical standards which have to be adhered to for research during emergencies. These include the research should be conducted only if it does not impede emergency response efforts. How should communities be engaged? What requires independent ethical review? Can research methodologies be adapted? How should research participants be selected? What are requirements for informed consent? To what extent should research be shared? And how would research benefit, help the decision makers, the policy makers during and after emergencies? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks very much.
Thanks so much. So we have about 25 minutes for Q&A. You can ask questions, either submitting your question online, and we have only one question for Isan, or you can, I guess, move around and use a mic to ask the questions, and you can post it to either one of the panelists or to the panel as a whole.
So maybe Dr. Abdullah Judy, can we have the microphone here, please? Yes, on the first row. Yes. The microphone, yes, thank you. Dr. Abdullah. Professor Muhammad.
السلام عليكم. تكلم بالانجليزيه ولا بالعربيه ولا اي منهما؟ انجليزيه؟ I speak in English, okay. The speaker from Iran, he spoke about procreation and the types of it, but he didn't mention that Khomeini himself and the great leader now also allowed the procreation from taking a donation of a sperm, a donation of an ovum, a donation of a uterus. Every type of donation, he accepted it. And he didn't mention that at all, which is completely refused by Majma' Fiqh Islami, by any jurist, Islamic jurist, by the Quran, by everything. It's not allowed to have children from donated sperm and donated ovum and donated uterus. All types of donations, he accepted them. And by Khomeini himself. And his follower also now, he's also accepting them. This is because the policy is to increase the population of Iran as much as we can. This is noticed, unfortunately, even with Hezbollah. Hezbollah, they are Fadlallah in Iran, in Lebanon didn't accept it. But the policy of the party itself is following what Iran is doing. This is very dangerous in Islamic point of view. And we think it is not accepted. All Muslim jurists, all through the history, and all their books and all discussions everywhere, they refuse all the types of donations and interference of somebody from outside between the husband and wife. This is هذا يسموه كان الجاهلية. It's called زواج الاستبضاع أو كانت حديث السيدة عائشة وهو موجود في البخاري ومسلم وغيره من الأحاديث. ويقول أنها كان الرجل إذا أراد نجابة الولد يترك زوجته ولا يجامعها ويرسلها لواحد ثاني حتى قوي وبطل وما أعرف إيه وشاعر وأديب وأي شيء من هذا القبيل، وتجلس عنده حتى يتبين حملها منه، ثم بعد ذلك ترجع إلى زوجها ويجامعها زوجها إن شاء. هذا النظام هو نظام جاهلي من أيام الجاهلية، رفضه الإسلام ومنعه منعا باتا. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Thanks, Professor. So I will ask Dr. Ihsan to respond first and then Professor Ghali, because I noticed during the presentation of Professor Ghali, he said the good thing about the jurisdictions that they cover different sects, the Shia sect, the Sunni sect, and the Ibadi sect, which are prevalent in the region. So maybe Dr. Ihsan, do you want to respond to this?
Really, I'm not a jurist and faqih to respond to this. I just explained the process. And what I understand is we need to respect the diversity of opinions in our region. And I know that there are many people living in this region, they are not Muslims. Right. Even they're not with the dominant schools of Islam, or they're very diverse situation. I agree with Dr. Judy about the influence of biopolitics and politics, and I mentioned this in my talk. And I think that yes, the position of Shia jurisprudence in Iranian government in governing the society has impacts and has influence on the kind of decisions. I don't know about the argument that was made to increase the population and those things, but I understand that these political opinions in all countries have impact on bioethics issues, as we can see in the United States, the political perspectives on abortion. But generally, I think that the main comment, it was not a question of me, but mostly a comment, is around disagreement about understanding from the Islamic sources. And I hope that this could be discussed in a kind of Islamic seminary or meeting. I'm not.
Thank you, Dr. Ihsan. Thank you very much, Professor, for your comment. I think there is a question in the second row, please. Your Professor Jafari? Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Amir Jafri. I'm from the Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture in Karachi, Pakistan. And I'm addressing my question primarily to Dr. Ghali. Your concept of putting a label of Islamic bioethics on bioethics, is that not running the risk of excluding others? I mean, you mentioned including in your discourse scholars and physicians and scientists and everybody else, but does that not make bioethics, in Islamic bioethics, does not make it more comfortable for one category of people following that particular sect or fiqh or school of thought, while as others who would also have benefited would be excluded? And I'm saying this from the context of Pakistan, where we have the vast majority of Muslims, but we have Sunnis as well as Shias and others. When we were naming our center 20 years ago, we named it Center of Biomedical Ethics and Culture, because culture is influenced by religion and religion by culture. How we practice Islam is different from how we practice Islam in Qatar or how we practice Islam in Indonesia or Afghanistan. There's a lot of cultural influence on the practice. In a similar fashion, if you want to include people, do these labels not limit your effort in propagating bioethics? Thank you.
Professor Mohammed Ghali, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the note. Of course, I didn't have time to elaborate a lot, and this is a topic that I like to speak about. It's much, but I will restrain myself. Don't worry. The ideal situation is that you would have someone who has hybrid knowledge. This is the ideal situation. Someone who understands the question at hand, the technicalities of it, and someone who can translate this question into normative rules based on in-depth knowledge of Islam and Islamic studies. But when the question started, the modern bioethics, if we may say, started east and west, right and left, in the second half of the 20th century, when we had the dialysis, the life support machines. You had new questions that contraceptives, all these organ transplantation, big things that are shaking everything, not only science, but also ethics. So we wanted to have questions. At this time, the educational system in the Muslim world was following the uniformity of modernity. So you have those who study humanities, including religious studies and so on, where you have the Arabic, where you have the Quran, Hadith, Tafsir, and all these. And those who will do applied sciences, medicine, and engineering, and so on. I myself studied at Al-Azhar. I stopped having anything to do with science when I was 14, something like this. So we didn't have this hybrid, we didn't have. So the only solution was to make this hybrid on the table, not in the person, but in the group. So you bring the group. That's why we had Ijtihad al-Jama'i. Is it better to have hybrid people who have, of course, always. It would be good to have many people like Dr. Al-Bar, for instance, someone who read fiqh quite well, and also he is himself a physician. But the education system need to change. We have, by the way, this is not, I hope this is not a paid promotion or something. We have an AIM program in applied Islamic ethics. I know you in Pakistan also have things about ethics, etc. So we teach Islamic studies, pure Islamic studies, and then how they would help with applied questions, including bioethics. So we are not physicians, we are not engineers, but we are teaching bioethics, we are teaching AI ethics, but as one of the offshoots of modern Islamic studies. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Professor Ghali. And it's actually very interesting, the scope which you cover. So it's not only health, you are covering Islamic studies in different realms of science, which is really appreciated. So we have another question. Professor in the front here, please.
Thank you. Wael Al-Dulaimi, I lead the first bioethics masters in the Arab region and the responsible conduct of research Arab Academy, which we just established, with the idea is that we want to introduce our heritage and culture into the mainstream bioethics. We know about the history, this good history.
This is at the UCSD, right?
No, it's based in Jordan, but it is led by the National Institute of Health. So my question is, how can we bring a different perspective to the more or less Judeo-Christian, colonial, individualistic bioethics that has dominated our training? And the question from our previous colleague reflects that it is only one way. You're either a scientist, secular, or you are not. But I believe from all of the speakers, and in this region can contribute a lot. Now, the decline, the colonialism that happened, of course, put this in the back burner. How can we bring it to be mainstream for people to pick from? I'll just give a quick example. The COVID situation made it very problematic when there were less resources. For example, in Italy, they began to decide they're going to give resuscitation or ICU only for those who are younger, because the older, they're going to die or something like that. That's not, of course, an Islamic perspective of prioritizing. So how can we do that in this age?
To whom do you address your question, sir?
Anyone who wants, from the panel, who wants to answer.
So maybe Professor Farhat Muaddam, please.
Yeah, thank you. If I understood your question about the COVID era and in Italy, some of the rules that came in about the older patients not given the same chance as the younger one. Am I correct? So these guidelines that were made during the COVID era, they were based primarily on medical grounds, so that if you have limited resources, then the decision was you have to save as many lives as you possibly can. So this is a bit like triage that doctors do. But the reason I wanted to point something out, which I found interesting, in Pakistan, our center, actually put together guidelines for when COVID was there. What do you do with limited resources? And how do you decide who you give it to? I believe we have a presentation on what we found. The guidelines that we made, actually, we tried to reflect some of the issues that culturally we face, because in Pakistan, the older member in the family is the one who's revered. So as one of our senior most surgeon laughed and said, okay, I'm so many years old, so you're not going to save me if I come in. So the thing I'm pointing to is that, so what we did, we also put in provisions to take care of family members. It's kind of extensive. We don't have the time to get into that. So the guidelines that we made in Pakistan, which was then adopted by the National Bioethics Committee, if you go through those, there are certain areas that are different, which reflect, in some ways, our own cultural values. So.
Would the other two panelists have anything to add on?
Thank you. Just to add to what Professor Maza mentioned, I think that really I adopt that this kind of dichotomy, Western, Eastern, or, bioethics, colonization, or imperialism, and those concepts are enough constructive. And, the main issue is the epistemic injustice in bioethics. The literature is mainly produced by secular, liberal points of view in bioethics. But just to say that these are not ours, these are external, I think it's a kind of passive strategy to respond. So what is more needed is more contribution, more investment in the global bioethics discourse. And this needs more academics, more centers, more funds in this area. So I just call to think about the essence and the nature of these dichotomies, if they are constructive or no.
So the clock is ticking away, I can see it from there. The question is for Ehsan. Maybe you can answer it quickly. So given that gender reassignment surgeries are quite common in Iran because of the lack of permission for gay couples, how would you evaluate this phenomenon as a bioethicist?
Really, I don't have any information about the relation between sex reassignment surgeries and gay couples. What I know in this area is that the permission for sex reassignment surgery was mainly based on a fatwa by the first leader of Islamic Republic of Iran, that what I was trying to explore was that the language that was used for receiving that permission was mostly a religious language. And I couldn't explain enough that it's important, the dialogue between different stakeholders. For example, the language of al-khuntha al-mushkil, which is one of the Islamic juristic concepts, was helpful to opening that dialogue. And I think that in every areas we need to find the proper language of dialogue between bioethics and religious scholars. I don't claim that this was a correct dialogue or no. This is not my area of work, but I'm just telling you about the language. So really, I don't have any information about these two issues.
Thank you, Dr. Ihsan. We have a question from Dr. Najat Khinyab for Professor Ghali. And the question goes like this. In case of disagreement among the couple for termination, I think she means termination of pregnancy, for valid reasons, whose decision should eventually prevail from a religious perspective? Is it the mother? Is it the father? Or the judge? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. First of all, there is the hospital where the person can do that. This hospital is part of an ecosystem that includes the ministry, the laws governing the country, etc. So the question is, will this be offered or not? So if it's not offered, there is no choice for the parents or whatever. First of all, the service should be possible, should be offered. Once it is offered, then we ask the question about whose decision should be, the father or the mother, etc. So at the level like what Ihsan was saying, there is the law, there is the fatwa, etc. So if we have governing, binding laws, then everyone should abide by, otherwise it would be a chaos.
It's also the duration of pregnancy also, right?
Sorry?
The number of weeks of pregnancy. This plays a very important role in the decision, right?
No, but again, if the country says from day one you cannot do anything, as a physician, as a parent, no one can do anything. So first we finish this part, and then we come. The country says under these conditions we can, but this is not an obligation. As a parent, I can choose or I cannot choose. It becomes an option. So in this case, whose opinion should weigh heavier? As I said, based on my readings, I don't remember I have a resolution here. I mean a collective one. You want to add something?
Yeah, after you.
Okay. I would say the mother would weigh heavier because we have two stakeholders that do not have the same share. So we have a father who has certain obligations towards the embryo, who has certain contribution towards the embryo or the fetus, and a mother with more. I counted them, but I can count more. So the life of the fetus is dependent upon the life of the mother, but not upon the life of the father. So the father may die during pregnancy, but the fetus will not die. I think. Yeah, there is no correlation. But if the mother dies, the embryo or the fetus will die, more likely. And that's why I think Ibn Abdin says over the fetus, nafsun min wajhin duna wajh. So a human being in one sense and not in another sense, because it's not independent. So the mother is the one who's carrying, the father is not.
Right.
Pain, delivery, suffering, hadana, etc. So we have enough reasons to say
Absolutely.
that the mother has a higher. But all this comes when the system, the country says, you can. Okay, we will choose or not, then the parents will decide.
Thank you, Professor Ghali. There was the very final question to Professor Muazzam.
Time's up.
Time's up, but I'm going to close this session with a question for Dr. Ahmad Mendil. So both Ehsan and Fahad are from WHO Collaborating Centers of Bioethics, and you're from EMRO. What is the relationship between the two entities, and what might be your vision for their collaboration forward?
Thanks, Dr. TC. So basically, as you know, the collaborating centers with the World Health Organization are actually global in nature. So having a center in one of the member states doesn't mean that this center will only serve the country, but also it will serve the region, if not the world. So the collaborating centers on bioethics in the region are part of a regional network of collaborating centers across the world, and there are 13 or even 14 of them nowadays. So the center in Iran and the center in Pakistan and the center in Lebanon are part of the global network of collaborating centers with the World Health Organization in the field of bioethics. They actually collaborate with each other. They serve the region, if not the world. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for your attention. I believe it's time for a coffee break. Thank you.